Greetings and welcome back to PinballHelp. Mike here. If you've been watching the previous videos in this series, then you know that I'm working on this Bally-35 MPU board that stopped working all of a sudden. The green LED light just blinked once, indicating a problem with the 6810 RAM chip. So I first replaced the RAM chip with another one, and that didn't do anything. So then I replaced the whole socket and put a new chip in, and I've got this thing hooked up to my power supply PC rig. There's another video where I show how to do this, so if you want to see, but you can take an old PC power supply, and if you short the power button switch on and then you jack into the red, yellow and black wires, you can add 5 volts and 12 volts to this board, and you can set up a little simple test bench, and you can get it to blink 6 of the 7 times. So rather than throw the board back in the machine, back out, I brought my little power supply over here, and I'm fiddling around with it. So I've got 5 volts, which is the red line, going to TP5 on the board. I've got the ground going to TP4. And then I've got the yellow 12 volts going to TP2 over here. So I'll turn the power supply on, and we'll see this light right here flash, hopefully, if everything is working. So let's see what we get. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now it's not going to do the 7th one because that relies on some additional things being hooked up in the machine, and probably the high voltage power for the coils and stuff. So we've gotten this game to get further than it did before after replacing this. There's a few things I want to talk about that happened to me that I didn't have the camera on for. One of which is right before I turned this on, I hooked everything up and I flipped it, and the light only blinked once again. And then I flipped it off and flipped it back on, and the light stayed lit. So then I just pressed on each of the chips here, turned it off, turned it back on, and it booted up. So this leads me to believe there's some other potential problem areas. We obviously diagnosed that there was a problem with the socket for the memory chip. In fact, I could pull this chip out and put the original one back in, and we'd know for sure that it wasn't the chip, it was the socket. So I may do that just to see. But I have a feeling that's what the problem is. These Bally-35 boards, they use sockets that kind of went bad after a short period of time, and so chances are some of these other sockets are also problematic. I see there's a different socket that's been installed over here, so there's already been some board work that before I got to the game. So I don't know how rock solid this is. It may or may not be rock solid. We'll find out. I also want to show you another little glitch that happened. So I'm going to disconnect all of this and show you the underside of the board. So I took this over to my shop, and I had a friend of mine help me with this. And what I did was, in order to remove this socket, I first sucked all the solder off, and I got almost everything off, and then the socket just came apart too. So it came apart, and there were just pins sticking out. So I had a friend of mine, I told him, I'm going to heat up this thing on this side, and I want you to just pull the pin out when I heat it up. And he got to about 4 of them, and then when I looked at what he was doing, he had literally pulled the traces up. He had pulled too hard. You know, it was one of these things where if you got an extra pair of hands, one person will work the back side of the board heating it up, and the other person will kind of wiggle and pull it out. Because it's hard to do this. You almost need 3 hands, or, you know, it's hard for me to... So having an extra person is really helpful, but the problem I ran into is this guy didn't have any experience with this. He pulled too hard. By the time I saw what was going on, he had literally pulled up 4 traces from the top side of the board. So you'll see I had to fix these right here. I had to repair the top traces on the bottom of the board. So even if things get screwed up, all is not lost. You can fix them. But obviously, again, the key is to be very, very gentle. And I swear I didn't do this. I've done this in the past. This was somebody else who just didn't realize, you know, how hard he had to pull when I had heated up the thing, and he accidentally pulled before the solder had completely melted, and it ripped the top traces off. So anyway, I rebuilt them on the back. And this is a, kind of a cautionary tale. Be careful. Because if you get, obviously it can get to a point where it's just not even, it's too much hassle trying to rebuild it. But anyway, I replaced the socket, and these are the traces on the top that were pulled off that I ended up fixing. Obviously, it worked because the game does boot up, but I think probably there's some problems in some of these other sockets, because after I pushed down on them, that was when the game booted up properly. So there you have it. Got this game fixed. I'm going to throw it in the machine and see if we can get it to play again. And I don't know if I'm 100% confident that it's, every other time you turn it off, it's not going to refuse to boot, because these sockets, Bally used some poor suppliers for these things, and they don't always work well. And soldering and desoldering these big chips is a very delicate operation. So it's fun to do if you want to try it. If for some reason you just don't want the hassle, you can pick up one of these puppies. This is the Alltech board. This is about $175, and this board right here is a complete replacement of the original MPU, and it doesn't have batteries on it, and it's a much higher tech version. So that's always an alternative. It's up to you. It's up to you to decide. Is it worth your time and trouble? But obviously, depends on the scenario. I like to get these old games working, but when you've got a bunch of games, sometimes it's easier just to buy the board, throw it in there, and you can practice on these boards. You get an old board, practice removing the sockets, putting them back on. That way, you don't have nothing lost. So there you have it. It's fun to do board work. It's very rewarding when you can actually rebuild a circuit board. That's kind of cool, And the chicks dig it. They do. So thanks for watching. Visit PinballHelp.com. Until next time.